Hello, fellow human, on this bittersweet journey of being alive, and welcome back to Why Your Life Really Matters, the Podbook. Now, I've already explored the idea that a new understanding is coming, and I've suggested it will be a return of spirituality, but in a whole new form, a form that could only exist after the scientific revolution, and that the key idea underlying this new spirituality, this whole new worldview, actually, is that everything is a process of becoming, that all qualities, all forms are one process of forming, nothing outside whatsoever, and that this links together the most primitive foundational levels of that process of forming through matter to life to psyche, and that psyche is the area that spirituality focuses on. Psychology, you could say, focuses on the individual psyche, but spirituality focuses on psyche as a whole domain, as a ecology of psyche, or ecology of soul. Psyche, as I've already said, simply is the Greek word for soul. And in this chapter, I want to try and get across as succinctly as I can the ontological view that can help me make sense of these claims. Ontology is simply the study of what exists. It's from the Greek for being. I want to describe my understanding, the understanding that I've come to, which in itself is not, in itself it is, I think, elegant and in that sense simple, but from it we can make some very interesting observations as this podbook develops. And to get it across quickly, I have found that it's easiest to use an analogy. Now, analogies are analogies. They should not be taken literally. They are analogies, but they can help. And the analogy which I want to use is that the universe is like an AI, a learning AI system. Now, it's not. This is not a computer. I'm not going to be claiming, look, really we're in a simulation, or, you know, if we saw it, it's just all the green numbers. We're in the Matrix. Nothing like that. That I will go into later why I think that's complete nonsense. But I do think that there are interesting parallels. In fact, I would say the reason that AI works is because it's mimicking in some way the way that reality is. So there's a few important claims I'm going to make very quickly in this chapter to try and give you the overall vision, or the ontological vision, from which then I want to explain how I have come to believe that we can understand, say, the survival of the soul, why your life really matters, in all sorts of different ways. So the first thing is that we have learnt that with simple information, the bit, this or that, the most simple piece of information, we can create virtual realities. I mean, right now you're seeing me talk to you, but this is all digital information on its foundational level. Now that's incredibly interesting, and we haven't known that for very long. We've also seen in physics that increasingly physicists have said, look, we went looking for the building blocks of existence, the atom, and the atom disappeared, and what we found was something best simply called information. Same thing. At the root of what existence is, there's something way before matter, which can only be understood as information. Now, what does that mean? Well, the simplest piece of information is this or that, the bit. Information is fundamentally differentiation, differentiating this from that. So I want to combine that with a very old understanding in spirituality, which I think from my spiritual exploration and experience is really important, which is that there's a fundamental oneness, which is arising as everything. And I think we can bring that together with this insight from physics and go, oh, look, there is something which has no form, which is one, which is formless, which is non-dual, to use a lot of spiritual jargon, which is differentiating. And the process of evolution is it differentiating into everything. And that's information. And that's like the information on your computer, which in its simplest form is just the this or that of the bit. And then it is becoming more and more and more and more complex until that one, which is differentiated into two, duality, this or that, becomes everything. This is very similar to spiritual teachings you'll find in Taoism, Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Pythagoreanism, of course, who rooted it all back into mathematical information. So what we've discovered in physics, if you want to understand the fundamental levels of existence, you need to use maths. Why? Because the fundamental levels of existence are pure information, and maths is the only language which is appropriate. Now, as it develops, we leave behind the language of maths. We need much more than that. You know, if I sent you, well, you're looking at this video now, and if I said to you, you know, what did you make of this chapter? And you went, well, I've looked at it very carefully, and it's a complex of digital information. I'd go, well, yeah, that's true, but that's not what I mean. I mean, what did you make of the ideas I was sharing with you and what I said and how I came across and blah, blah. Because if you just get the digital information, you wouldn't have any of the ideas. So it's on its foundational level, the universe is the same. It's information. But it's evolved into far more. It's evolved into you and love and music and beauty and... So this is not reductionist. I am not saying, and you'll see why as I explain more, I'm not saying you can reduce it just to the lowest levels. The complete opposite. I'm saying the more emergent is always more than and cannot be reduced. That's the whole point. So that's the first thing. This is information. And that's what everything has in common. So if I look around me at the physical world, I'm discerning different differentiations. Oh, this is that. That's lighter, that's darker, that's harder, that's softer. Everything is being differentiated into all of the different systems, including myself. Even with thought, if I go to thought, it's imaginal, it's not physical, but I'm differentiating this idea from that idea. Everything is being differentiated. Everything is me discerning the differentiations. That's probably the better way to say it. It's all information. But as information develops onto these other levels, then we need whole new ideas, categories with which to understand what existence is on this more emergent level. So what is it that's evolving through the whole thing, right from the simplest right the way up to me sharing this idea? It's all information, but it can't be reduced to the simplest information. The complex information is much more than, much more than, much more than. Okay, that's the first thing. So how does it do that? How does it move from the simplest piece of information, this or that, through to this, this amazing thing we're experiencing? How does that happen? And I think what can help us is to imagine the universe as somewhat like an AI system. And that shouldn't surprise us. You know, it's like whatever the latest technology, it allows us to use it as an analogy. When the Enlightenment happened, we had these amazing machines. People looked at the universe and went, it's kind of like a machine. And on the lower levels, it kind of is. And that was helpful for a bit. We moved on. Now we've got something more. We can go, oh, no, it's much more like this. We'll move on from this analogy as well, make no mistake. But right now, it's the best we've got. Because what it shows us is, well, there's been a let's go back a bit. We've known for quite a while that there's a thing called the game of life, which sets up very simple rules and allows a computer to operate. And what we see is it forms structures and interacts and does things from the simplest of rules. What's happened more recently is there's been a study in a team in Google, you should check it out if you're interested, which have shown that even if there's no rules, none at all, what is random information digitally will start forming patterns, start forming systems that are interacting. So that's what AI has shown us. And that's a great way of understanding what's happened with the universe. That what starts as random information, it forms into patterns, and the patterns repeat. Now, why do they repeat? Well, here's the way I'm approaching this, which is random information is probabilistic. It's could be this, could be that, 50% chance. But once it has formed a pattern, that probabilistic situation changes. It's now slightly more likely that it will repeat. And as that slightly more likely happens more and more, it becomes very likely it will repeat. And then it becomes a system. So in this way, you could say that the universe is learning, like us, but on a very much more primitive level. What we're experiencing as learning is a very emergent, conscious, often, form of something that's happening in a much more primitive way, unconsciously, obviously, all the way through, which is, it is setting up patterns that repeat. Now, I call that a pastivity. It's a word I invented in Soul Story. I found it useful. Other people have too. If any of the words I use are unfamiliar, go to my website. There's a glossary there. You can check out what these words mean. But by pastivity, what I mean is the past tends to repeat, so that the past is conditioning what is forming. And I think that's fairly self-evident if you look at your experience, because right now, this moment mainly repeats the moment before, but not quite. And that's passivity. It's like every new moment must include within it everything that's already happened. So in this way, you can see that the universe is like a autodidactic or self-teaching AI system. And we now know that just how incredible they are. In fact, there's been a paper came out not that long ago while I was working on this expansion of Soul Story, where I share these ideas for the first time, in which 12 very notable physics professors of physics wrote a paper called The Autodidactic Universe. So this idea is taking off. There's been predecessors to this idea. This is not a new idea from me. There's predecessors in biology, like Rupert Sheldrake. There's predecessors in philosophy, like Charles Sanders Peirce. And there's predecessors in physics, like Lee Smolin, although that's more recent and probably after my work in Soul Story. He calls it the power of precedent, which is interesting. So it's like, once it's been set up in a certain way, it's more likely to repeat. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because it says, oh, those laws of nature, they aren't laws decreed by God, the lawmaker. They're patterns. They're more like algorithms, which are forming in the evolutionary process. And what that does, and there's much more to say on this, which I will return to in detail, but what that does is it says, oh, it's not that there's a set of rules at the beginning and then everything else is just a byproduct of those rules. No, the rules themselves are forming. So you can't reduce it to a deterministic, the universe that can only turn out this way because it was set up at the beginning like this, that disappears. That awful reductionist, determinist view disappears, and instead you end up with a creative universe. Because although the past is repeating, it's probabilistic, and it doesn't quite repeat, ever. Every moment is new. I mean, it's obvious, but it's astonishing. Every moment is new. Every moment contains the past in a new way. So there's the pastivity, repeat the past, and then there's creativity, which is throwing up new things. Now, that's also like AI. A generative AI takes everything it knows and combines it in a new way to create something new. That's what's happening with the universe. The relationship between systems are constantly moving and changing, and that creates newness. Sometimes really significant newness, mostly just slightly different. But sometimes something emergent happens and you come onto a whole new aspect of reality emerges. And also then in complex systems, all the elements that make up the complex system are coming into new relationships. That's happening right now. As I say these words, which I've never quite said this before, they've come into a new relationship and bang, there's something new. So, the plant behind me, the table, they've all stayed the same. But me, I'm a very emergent level of this, and we're changing all the time. So still pastivity. I speak with this accent, my pastivity, where I grew up, how people spoke when I was young. I wave my hands around, my pastivity, all the things that make me me, but also coming into new relationships, which makes this moment creative. So the universe is information, which is learning how to become more the whole time. That's not conscious, it's not volitional, it's a natural process whereby the past governs what can happen next, and what happens next will always be slightly new. Pastivity and creativity. And it's built into the very fabric of what the universe is, which is a process of becoming. And the process of becoming is a continuation of what's already become in a new way. So where is all this pastivity then? Well, on a AI system, it's on a hard disk. And the hard disk is moving and changing and being adapted. And then you see the screen. And I want to suggest the universe is a bit like that too. That where things are interacting in the newness of the now, that's like the screen. But behind it, there's all this information, which is like on a hard disk. It's not a hard disk. But in this analogy, what is that like a hard disk? What is it? And I want to suggest it is the past. Now, in physics, since before Einstein, the time has been treated like another dimension. You've heard the phrase, I'm sure, space-time. It's another dimension. And I think that's right, although I don't quite agree with Einstein's interpretation of that idea, and in a later chapter I'll say why. But I do think it's a type of dimension, that we exist in also a temporal dimension as well as spatial ones. And that the past hasn't gone somewhere. The past doesn't pass, it accumulates. It is information which accumulates. Everything which has come into form has formed. The past is what it is. We can re-understand it and, of course, see more in it, see things we didn't see before, but it is what it is. It's formed. And what is formed forever. It's formed. And this moment here is the forming, and the future is formless. It doesn't exist. So that the past is accumulating. There's more of it. There's more now than when you started watching this video. And every moment is part of the pastivity. setting up the patterns that operate on all these different levels, from the very repetitive patterns of the very established levels, like on the physical level, to the more mutable patterns on the biological level, and to the highly mutable patterns on the level of the psyche. All of that is being increased now, and now, and now, and now. There's more past. There's more past. So that the past is like the hard disk of the universe. It exists. And that pastivity, forming new relationships, like an AI, like a generative AI, throwing up new things all the time, is what's got us from hydrogen to us having this conversation. And then as it's hit these levels of the psyche, it's moving very, very fast, because it can generate now creatively. All the creation that's happened up till the arriving of consciousness has been unconscious, unreflective. And then with the psyche and with consciousness, we'll explore that soon, what that is, suddenly we can do it on a whole new level. And that's what we've been doing. Okay, so what I've been trying to explore in this chapter is a new ontology, a new way of seeing what existence is, which will allow me to explain why I think we can understand spirituality, take it seriously, link it to our scientific understanding, and show how things which otherwise seem very implausible, like the survival of the psyche after death, are not implausible. They're worth considering from this point of view of this new ontology. And this ontology is saying, look, the universe is a process of forming. The most basic category, idea that we need to understand this is differentiation. It's a process of differentiation where that's information. Those differences are information. Everything is information. But it's information on ever more emergent levels, which cannot be reduced to the lower levels. And it's a process whereby patterns have been set up which tend to repeat, but always in slightly different new ways. It's a dance between pastivity and creativity that enables this woo to come from a gas to us consciously sharing ideas. And that the past hasn't gone anywhere. It forms the operating system of the universe. And that everything is a pastivity system. I'm a pastivity system. You're a pastivity. The plant is a pastivity system. Everything which governs how we function. And they're all linked together and they're all interacting, but they're quite distinct. They're individual. And they give everything its particular algorithms, if you want. Now, once again, as I started off, I am not saying you're really an algorithm. I'm saying you're a human being. But the way to understand what that might mean in this complex, multi-leveled evolutionary universe is to use this analogy, carefully, to use this analogy and go, oh, I see. So there's a level we can understand with maths, purely informational. I'll come back and say more about that. Becoming the level we understand with physics, the level we understand with biology, and then the psyche. And we have psychology, which helps us understand our individual interaction on the level of the psyche. But there is also spirituality, which has always been about understanding the psyche, not just as a little bubble of your personal psyche, but as a whole ecosystem of psyche, we might say today, in which we interact and which spirituality explores. So, more on that later. For now, I just want to just play with me for a moment and just see this moment as it were, like the screen on the computer. You look at the computer, but if I told you there's nothing else, there's just what's on the screen, that's all that exists, for heaven's sakes. When have you ever seen anything other than what was on the screen? It's all that exists. Then I think you'd be wise enough to go, no, Tim, there's a whole hard disk full of operating systems interacting on different levels which govern what appears on the screen. It's not just what's on the screen. That's crazy. That's all you ever see, because that's the screen. But behind the scenes, there's an enormous amount of information governing what happens. Okay, now this moment, the real world, which isn't a computer. But nevertheless, what you see, what is happening now, is being governed by a vast complex of informational systems. And these are the so-called laws of nature, but they're not laws, really. They're algorithms or even habits or patterns that play out in new ways. And what we're doing with science, and often with spirituality and other levels as well, is we're looking deeper. What's operating this? What's operating this? And as we do that, our knowledge expands. There is indeed more going on than meets the eye. Of course there is. Of course there is. Join me in the next chapter to look at a new way of understanding spiritual awakening and God. These chapters are released every week. But if you can't wait, if you'd like to get access to all of the chapters I've recorded so far and the new ones as soon as I record them, you can do that by joining the ICU, the International Community of Univigils, my online community. Plus, you'll get the chance to attend our weekly online meetups on a Sunday, where you can discuss ideas directly with me, or you can watch the recordings if you can't make the actual event. So, I look forward to welcoming you into our little band of life explorers.